Well, hello, besties. Hey, besties. Like, let me drop down another octave. Hey, besties. How is everyone? I see there's already people in the chat. Let me see. I need something to bring my mic up a little bit more. What can I use? I don't really have anything. I guess I'll just have to leave it. You know me so well. Okay, well, that's just gonna be what it's gonna be, isn't it? Yeah, I need a stand. I need a stand for my mic. Let me just scoot up to the computer. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. Hi April. Thank you. Hey Deb. Hey Olivia. Yes, hey Daria. Happy Sunday. Yes, Emilia, I did wear white and the hat, and I'm sure you know why I wore white and the hat after this morning. Hey, Samaje. Still sleepy. I slept in late. I'm jealous. I went to bed late and still managed to wake up at 7:30. Can't help myself now that I'm on a schedule of 6:30. Just be like that sometimes. Um yeah, happy full moon in Virgo, which was yesterday. Happy Venus stationary direct finally. And by I think 5 o'clock Central this evening, happy Sun in Aries. Which is the astrological new year for us using the sidereal zodiac. So, looking forward to reading the Aries ingress chart, not this week, but next week. And um, very curious how having planets in Aries will affect Mars and Cancer. We're not doing a transit chat specifically today, but I did want to mention, of course, the transits for the week and just a couple of political thoughts that I had because I did want to throw those out there and then observe over the next week while the sun is in Aries, kind of how things change. So, um, first things first, transits this week while more people are pulling up. Oh, well, the only transit this week is the sun entering Aries later today. So nothing super special happening this week other than the moon will be in Scorpio on Tuesday. And then we'll move into Sagittarius by Thursday night. So there's that. And then Sunday, I think we have the sun square Mars. So before I speak to you next, the sun and Mars will be squaring each other. I will be talking about that aspect mostly in retrospect, considering it will have built up all week before I see you again. As far as things that I'm speculating on right now and that may reveal themselves to be true or not true, may reveal themselves to be more or less true over the next week, is all of the economic volatility that we're experiencing right now. I know a lot of people are concerned about the tariffs. A lot of people are concerned about the stock market, and going into a recession and maybe even another Great Depression situation. Like there's a lot of concern. And so I was having a thought last week and I talked to Nadine about this a little bit where it just came to me. I was thinking about it and I was like, speculation is a word that I've used for Pisces. And it didn't occur to me until people were talking about the stock market and market exchange things where they said, market speculation is a thing. And speculation is one of the things that actually led to the stock market crash of October 1929, that eventually led to the Great Depression. So I was like, oh, well, speculation is a Pisces word. We're dealing with a lot of stock market stuff right now, as recession indicators and things like that. And in general, I think with Trump's presidency, at least this first 6 months, there's just a lot of us having to speculate around what he's even doing, what the plan is, where all of this is going, because he's largely been unpredictable. And that puts us in a position of everything moving forward is pretty uncertain. Uncertainty being another mutable sign word as well. So I was thinking, okay, well, to me, and this is something we'll just have to observe moving forward, so I want to introduce it now. To me, if we were headed towards a really long, drawn out, and consistent depression, at least, what I would expect to see is more cardinal stuff, but specifically more Saturn stuff, because, especially like Capricorn, and other earth signs, even Virgo and Taurus, like I would expect to see actual material, economic changes from significant earth signs, and especially like Saturn ruled stuff, right? And that to me is mostly like what we've been going through the last 6 years with Saturn and Capricorn, and then Saturn and Aquarius, and then Jupiter also moving through Capricorn and Aquarius. So that to me was maybe some, I don't know, some recession indications, because that's what Saturn does. It constricts. But Jupiter expands, for lack of a better word. It exacerbates, it makes things worse. And so what I really think, to summarize all of this, what I really think is happening, at least for 2025 and maybe 2026, is not necessarily like a material recession, as in like we've run out of things. I mean, that's also a possibility. So take that with a grain of salt, but I don't necessarily see it as like us running out of resources other than like eggs, and poultry and things dealing with bird flu, animals dealing with bird flu, stuff like that. But mostly the cost of living crisis, which this is not new. A lot of people are saying this. I think the astrology is really talking about continued market volatility. So this constant, like, depending on what Trump says that day, what mood he's in that day, and how his tariff war is going, just constant fluctuations of the market responding to Trump. And I say that because of Mars in Cancer, dealing with responsiveness, like we've talked about before, and then Saturn in Pisces, dealing with things like speculation and uncertainty. So are we headed directly into a recession? I don't know. I think we're mostly dealing with just constant market fluctuations, going back and forth, and just not really having any kind of regulated economic things for a while. It's just a lot of ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. I don't necessarily see sustained downs at the moment because a lot of this is made up. Stock market shit is made up. So it's gambling. So there's a lot of gambling in that sense. But I think with the sun moving into Aries, kind of adding more cardinal and also changing the way that Mars in Cancer functions, I think that would provide more insight. So anyone who's like super duper stressed about tariffs, just know that the president is a flaky bitch. So he's reactionary and responding to his own desires in a given moment and his own power struggles at a given moment. And then so is the rest of the world. What's going to happen next? Who knows? I wouldn't read into it, or rather, I wouldn't invest too much stock into things being one way or another. I would just expect it to be volatile for the foreseeable future until we get more information. So wanted to open with that as an actual astro thing to pay attention to over the next week, and then we can discuss further once we get to next Sunday. So there's that. Now, what I actually want to talk about today is a lot more personal, and I will say right out front that I'm scared to do this. I'm approaching this with a brave face and with a lot of anxiety in my chest, and a lot of nervousness about what I'm going to say and how it's going to come across. So I want to set the context of all of this to say this is my perspective on a series of events. And the reason that I want to talk about it publicly and with you all is because I've wanted to talk about this publicly for the last 2 years, but didn't know how, didn't really feel like I was in a place emotionally or maturity wise to do so in a way that would be respectful. And I also want to do this with people publicly because many of you who have followed me and have followed my work and all of these things for the last several years were also a part of this. And I feel a lot of guilt and responsibility for the fact that a community that we were all involved with just kind of dissolved one day out of nowhere, and nobody really got any kind of insight or understanding of why that happened. And a lot of people were hurt by that. A lot of the feedback I've gotten, and of course I'll explain what I'm talking about, but a lot of the feedback that I've gotten over the last couple of months and also over the last couple of years is that, a lot of people felt like they were left in the dark, but didn't feel like it was their place to pry, to ask questions, or that, that it was their business, but that they felt a lot of grief and they felt a lot of sadness and they felt hurt. And I think in some ways, whether they said it or not, probably felt abandoned by me and a group of other astrologers who were basically like seen as leaders of this community. So I'm mostly bringing this up to hopefully provide some context and some clarity, and to also like maybe take a little bit more ownership on my role of that, but to also just tell the truth about some of the things that I was noticing and experiencing, as well as some other people. How much detail will I get into? I don't know. We'll just kind of have to see where this goes. But this isn't coming out of nowhere for me. So what I want to talk about today is the dissolution of the Divination for Liberation community. which I've, of course, talking about a little bit in the past. And I also want to talk about a little bit just from my personal lens, because I do talk about personal things on my channel, my relationship with Dana, the People's Oracle. So to start, for people who were not around between, let's say 2017 to 2024, mostly 2023. You may not know about this community called Divination for Liberation, but it was formed by basically my former mentor, who I've mentioned before, Dana, the People's Oracle, and her framework of how she uses the sidereal zodiac and how she's used it as a framework, or developed it, I will say, as a framework that's meant to be like a decolonized version of astrology, that's meant to be a liberation oriented version of astrology. And from my perspective, originally was more politically oriented than, like, kind of what it's evolved into now, which I don't know because I don't follow her anymore. But basically serendipitously over time, especially during the pandemic, this group, this I don't know, this community evolved into a group whenever we started hosting full moon parties. And, for reference, I think I've said before, I met Dana around the age of 23, I think, is when we actually became friends. I probably got introduced to her work around 22 years old in 2017, right after I graduated college and got into astrology, was having my woo-woo girl era at the time. And just like getting into all of the esoteric things getting into all of the esoteric things. And how I came across her work was she was one of the only astrologers that I saw that actually predicted that Trump was going to win the 2016 election. So that was a really big deal. And from my understanding, that was kind of how she also got a lot of publicity and attention. She was somewhat involved with the tropical astrological community through people like, what's his name? Tropical astrologer. Y'all know who he is. What is his name? Somebody tell me. Chris? Is it Chris? Why can I not think of the astrology podcast guy? His name. Chris Brennan. I know she was on his podcast. I know she was working with some other astrologers. So Sam Reynolds is also one of those people. Yeah, for sure. So she was involved with some big names. She has a podcast episode with Chris Brennan and with that other girl. I don't remember her name either. I can't remember anybody's names right now because I'm so nervous and sweaty. Anyway, besides the point. But yes, she's on one of his podcast episodes, and I remember listening to that and thinking, oh, like, cool, like, whatever. So got into her work. I was obsessed, and I really wanted to, I don't know why. I, at the time, just was like, I'm really into this. It feels like she's speaking my language because, I just graduated with a psychology degree, sociology degree, and was slowly starting to get radicalized, like, into the more kind of leftist, decolonial perspective on things. I was already anti-capitalist, and so her framework really spoke to, or at least the way that she used astrology really spoke to, some of these anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist themes. So I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I'm into this. So from there, eventually she noticed me, and I think she noticed the way that I was also talking about astrology, purchasing her guides and things like that back in 2018 when I first moved to Austin. She noticed me, and basically, long story short, we became friends, like very quickly became friends. I would show up to all of her lives on Instagram. I was always like there with her every morning at 9:30 in the live with like 7 or 8 other people, and just listening to what she would say about politics and what she would say about other just astrological transits of the week. And that was mostly how I started learning sidereal astrology. I still used a little bit of both at the time. And then by the end of that year, I was like totally done with tropical astro. I had no use for it. and talking with her while also, the place I was at in my life at 23 was, I'd been out of college for 1 year, really wanted to get out of my hometown because I was still, dealing with some identity things and kind of starting to notice some things about my relationship with my parents and family members and just all these things. But I just moved to Austin, didn't really have any friends. I was working all the time, and it was cool to have a friend, just like a new friend basically, and share this practice with. So pretty much from the end of 2018, I would say, we talked all day, every day, all the time over text. We just were constantly talking. And then there were even phases where I was in a group chat with her and her other best friend. And the three of us would just be talking all the time. And once we got to 2020 in the pandemic era, we'd been friends for at least a year and a half. We'd gone through a lot of personal life stuff together. We were pretty damn close by then. And the pandemic beginning was like one of the first, I wouldn't call it necessarily a prediction, because I don't remember if we explicitly were like, oh, this is going to be COVID, like that week of March is going to be COVID. But I do remember us for weeks talking about, yeah, this week in March looks suspicious as hell. Kind of some once in a lifetime transit stuff. So buckle up. And then once we realized what it was, and then everybody goes into lockdown, everybody is more online. More people are paying attention to her lives. More people are kind of finding out about sidereal astrology, at least in our corner of the internet, and more people are just engaging with the work, especially as she's, using this kind of decolonial language or this kind of revolutionary language. And, on the personal end, her reading my chart and the discussions that we would have just about my own chart, right, as I'm like new to this practice, really opened my eyes up to my own stuff that like I maybe didn't have language for, or honestly a lot of stuff in my own life that I really downplayed and didn't take seriously within myself. And so it was kind of this like experience for me of the first time that I felt like somebody actually saw me, and that someone actually like listened to me and gave language to my experiences that I didn't have before. And I know that this has been an experience that a lot of you have had as well, if you were introduced to her work early on. And so I was sold. Like I was going to be the number one fanboy for sidereal astro and diffra lib. And along the way, it seems like the more people started finding out about her work and joining in on our conversations, then by 2021, I want to say, we went through 2020. That was like the whole George Floyd rebellion, which was something that I believe she coined that term. Maybe she didn't, but that was something that she talked about a lot. And that, along with a lot of Black Lives Matter and all of these other events, really got more attention on her and her framework, because the way that she was talking about everything using astrology was something that a lot of us hadn't necessarily witnessed before. And if we had heard people talking about astrology politically, it just wasn't really the same as like how it hits when it's actually coming from a Black woman, like usually you hear astrology from cishet white men, and it's like they kind of talk above things without really getting into the nuances of it, and sometimes just outright avoid politics altogether. So it was really captivating to hear someone speak with so much charisma and so much confidence and so much conviction about beliefs that I think many of us held but just didn't have the language for. So to have the language and this experience and this framework to really like get into what's happening at the state of the world at that time was a really big deal to many of us. And so by the end of 2020, after me kind of like realizing a lot of stuff that was going on at the yoga studio that I was working at, which is another conversation for another day that I keep saying, but like realizing a lot of the issues at the yoga studio, and then kind of getting closer working with her, like, sitting and working on the 2020 guide with her, or sitting working on the 2021 guide with her, like having so many conversations, basically helping her refine her ideas and put things into words or to just see things differently, because I was bringing, my education of psychology and sociology related stuff and saying like, oh, when you talk about this planet like this, it actually makes me think of this thing that we learned in psychology, whatever, like this constant conversation that we were in, helping evolve her thoughts. Like, to me, I just thought it was cool to be in the room. I just thought it was cool to like have her attention and for her to notice me and to think that, maybe I had something meaningful to say or contribute, and that I was helping. I'm probably like 25 at this point. And then by the end of 2020, I decided, after a conversation with her, actually, where she had, and my memory is fuzzy on this, so I do remember there being some kind of a conversation where she had alluded to this idea of me like working for her, and potentially even being able to have benefits if it worked out that way, and it was, to me, felt like a kind of a loose promise, or a loose invitation rather, of like, I have all of these plans and I want you to be a part of them with me. I think we could do something really great with all of this. And I'm like, hell yeah, brother. Like, of course, duh. So I ended up quitting the yoga studio in December 2020. And for many of you, those of you who were around at that time, that was also when Clubhouse became a thing, the audio hangout app. And I think Clubhouse is really where things took a turn, not for the worse, but like took a turn into like more visibility and more prominence, and where my audience started to grow as well. So we get to October 2021, and then Clubhouse becomes a thing. And Clubhouse, if you weren't there, was like this invite only app. It was only on iOS systems, and there were a lot of celebrities on there. There were a lot of influencers on there, like a lot of prominent people. Like, I've met a lot, like there were times that we met a lot of famous people on that app. You just happen to be on there. You meet a lot of famous people. You met a lot of just like prominent, what are they called? What are they called? I don't know. Just like you just met a lot of like prominent people that you otherwise wouldn't have met, because it's just everyone's voices and you're just hanging out. And it was a really cool creative space. And that's, I think, where she really started to grow, I think, her own voice and her audience, and where our relationship became a little bit more of a working relationship, because I would moderate her rooms for her, kind of managing who comes up and down on the stages, and just like, doing some kind of background stuff. And I was also working as her admin for a lot of 2020 as well, just doing a lot of sending charts out, sending audio recordings out to her clients. I was like, had her passwords to things. Like, we were like, when I say we were close, we were extremely close. We were both friends, and I was a bit of her like protege, like, whatever, assistant in some ways, like admin stuff, like, yeah. So we were pretty enmeshed by 2021, and I started doing readings on the side as well, just because I wanted to talk about astro. People wanted to listen, so we get into it. And then by February 2021, after we've hosted rooms, and like we would host rooms and she would have like thousands of people in the room, if I remember correctly, if not just hundreds, but definitely like at some points, thousands of people in the room, especially depending on the transit in the conversation. And then, yeah, just kind of getting people excited about the work and people getting mini readings and all this type of stuff. And so, we became pretty popular on the app. And by the time between that and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and everything else, a lot of people had basically gotten on board. I decided to do readings, I think officially in February 2021. And that was when she also kind of like caught on that I was doing readings, and then would start kind of broadcasting to people that I was also doing readings, that I learned directly from her. And, if her books are full, I'm the next person to go to. So that is kind of the point where I think I met many of you who, if you were already following her work, then you find out like, okay, well, who the fuck is Winter? Who's Mixed Mercury? And getting a reading from me, I was booked and busy in 2021, like booked and busy. I was probably doing 10 readings a week for like $60 through most of the summer. And at the same time, like I said, in our little group chat, constantly discussing ideas, constantly talking about our life through the lens of astrology and everything else. And so then we get to, I think it was it also, I think it was also in 2021 in February when we had our first full moon party. It was a full moon in Leo. And I just had the idea of like, hey, like, what wouldn't it be cool if we just like hosted like a free full moon party to talk about the full moon? Like, I don't know, it just was an idea. And I got Madison, Sidereal Maven, involved. I also got Elias, Papa Boko involved, and Dana involved, and everybody said yes. And I was like, cool, let's host a Zoom. Let's just make it free. Let's see who shows up. And between the four of us, we had hosted on my Zoom server, like hundreds of people show up, and like to the point where we couldn't fit everybody in the room. So we had people waiting outside of the room trying to come in and be in the conversation with us. It was a really big fucking deal. None of us were expecting that. It was like, holy shit. where did you people come from? It was like a random Wednesday in February, and we had really deep conversations just about, Leo shit. And to me, that was really the first like community formation moment of Diff for Lib, going from being this kind of liberatory framework to now a community of people online who wanted to talk about using astrology in, again, these kind of radical, revolutionary, decolonial ways. And there's this idea that all of this is meant to be for liberation purposes. And her original goal for this framework was for it to be used by, people who are activists and organizers and nonprofits and whoever else, people who are actually on the ground doing the work. Like I remember her saying a vision that she had for her work was for it to be used for that purpose. So it was kind of cool to like have this space where we were really, really felt like changing people's lives, changing people's perspectives on themselves, changing the way that they looked at the world, changing the way that they looked at their relationships and just like politics and ways that they've been impacted by things and not fully realized it. It was really, really significant. And so we wanted to keep doing it. We were like, this was such a fucking success. Like, let's keep it going. And so we kept doing it. And they weren't all hundreds of people in the room, but they were, 60 sometimes people, anywhere from 50 to 60 to 70 people just hanging out with us, talking and listening and sharing really vulnerable, intimate stories. I also started hosting support groups for different like zodiac signs alongside this, where people could come and just hang out with me. And I would host events of people just coming to talk about, if you had Leo placements, like let's all commiserate on what it's like to have Leo placements. Let's all commiserate on what it's like to have Scorpio placements, stuff like that. So 2021 was very busy in that sense of full moon parties and workshops. And I think it was probably by 2021, October of 2021 that, after a summer of all of this activity, all of these conversations, Dana comes out with the Wounds and Gifts workshop. It was like a 3-part series. And this is the framework really that I think is some of her best work, and like a piece of work in a framework that's really, really important and special to me, that I still use it to this day. If you've heard me reference Wounds and Gifts, that was a workshop that she'd hosted, and it broke down the modalities and started describing them as tasks. It broke down the elements and described them as tools. It broke down the ways that planets and modalities and elements come together to form signs, and then has this kind of the wounds, gifts, and coping strategies way of describing Sorry, I got a message. Got it was a really unique way of describing really everything, every component of astrology, but especially the zodiac signs, because it seems like people really get confused on, how to interpret zodiac signs and what that means. And so between that and her How to Read Your Sidereal Birth Chart workshop that I think was the year before, those were a lot of things that I was directly inspired by, and that I will come back to this in a little bit, but those were a lot of things that I was really inspired by, and that just felt like an intuitive way to use astrology for me, especially from the perspective that I wanted to use astrology, which was, after going to school for psychology and sociology, to like work directly with people. I had somewhat of a dream at the time, especially the more that I started doing readings. I had this dream of like, okay, if I'm not going to go back to school and get a master's, right, or get a PhD or whatever, and to actually like be a therapist, like licensed therapist, I didn't really have any interest in paying for grad school, really, was the thing. I would go back to grad school if somebody else wanted to pay for it, but at the time I was burnt out of school, and I just, didn't really fuck with the institution as well, while we're talking about like decolonial stuff. So I was like, it'd be really cool if there's a way that I could work with people like a therapist, like a counselor or something, but not have to go to grad school and do it. And of course, for me, I'm like, okay, there could potentially be some ethical concerns around that. But the more that I'm using astrology in this way, and especially after Wounds and Gifts, the more that I was using Wounds and Gifts in readings with people, in the subject matter that would come up in those conversations, it started to feel more and more to me like, okay, this feels like exactly what I want to do. And also, like, I want to do it responsibly. I'm kind of winging it right now because of all of the psychotherapy content that I was consuming on the side through podcasts and things like that. But I was starting to feel, me and honestly some of the other astrologers that were also giving readings using this framework, were starting to feel like, man, people are really bringing some deep, heavy life stuff. And even in the full moon parties, like we had some really emotional full moon parties. People are talking about all kinds of really heavy content, to the point where it required trigger warnings a lot of times. And that to me just felt like something I wanted to take a lot of care around and a lot of responsibility around, because, people are really vulnerable. And especially whenever you're dealing with like spiritual spaces as well, like spirituality and occult spaces as well, it can get tricky, in my opinion, using things like astrology or tarot or, whatever it is to kind of start getting into people's like psyche, and their life experiences, especially traumatic ones. So I think just it started to feel like a lot, especially for me and some of the younger astrologers. We called ourselves the sidereal sibs. And I don't know, there was just a time period where it felt like that burden of responsibility was getting heavier and heavier, and we weren't really sure what to do about it. So we tried to tread lightly. We just, we did our best moving through it, but it was a concern. So kind of holding that here, and something I'll circle back to later. As far as like my personal relationship with Dana during this time, it was very much like, yeah, she's telling me, we're having conversations on the side about, me and our other mutual friend are helping her with these guides, which there's more I could say about that I won't say here, but there were other people's inputs into her yearly guides that I think they didn't get enough credit for their contributions, especially in actually forming the first guides, right? But we both helped edit the guides. We both helped flesh out the ideas. We both helped, I think, through just our daily conversations, we started to notice, me and this other friend in our personal group just kind of started to notice, like, every time Dana was on lives or whatever it was. And to her credit, she would say, like, we're in, Dana would be on lives and say things like, yeah, I was talking to Winter and this other person about XYZ thing and this and da 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 da. Like, she would name us. She would mention at times like, hey, like, yeah, this thought was inspired by the homies. And at the time that felt like enough to me, because again, I'm just like happy to be here and happy to be mentioned at all in this thing that I thought was really great and important. But once we kind of got me and this other friend kind of got the first look, I guess, into Wounds and Gifts, I remember the other friend coming to me, and I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning a little bit of this, so I won't say too much, but I remember her just kind of saying, this is interesting. This kind of sounds like a lot of stuff that like you and I have said in these conversations. Mind you, both of these friends are at least 10, 12 years older than me, so I was just kind of like, yeah, yeah, like just kind of like, yeah, maybe. And there were some other interpersonal dynamics involved that kind of shaped my response at the time, but it was like, yeah, that is kind of interesting. But in my mind, I'm thinking, she does at least name us when she's talking publicly, so it's fine. But it did start to seem like the work was shifting from being more politics focused to more kind of like psychology focused. And so over time, trying to figure out where I want to go with this next. Over time, I think this like burden of responsibility thing that we were grappling with. What was I saying? Hold on, I got lost in my own thought. Oh, I was saying conversations on the side with Dana. Yeah, there were a lot of moments where, I'm getting a lot of praise from her publicly, directly, whatever it is, a lot of validation of like how well I use her system, how much I help form her thoughts, like her, saying, thank you so much for like everything that you do for me sincerely. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't be able to accomplish, or, things I wouldn't have been able to come up with, or just whatever, giving me a lot of credit personally, like in our one-on-one conversations, to say like, I couldn't do what I was doing if it wasn't for you. And I'm just over here like a child thirsty for validation and approval from literally anybody because of where I was at in my life, that I'm like, hell yeah, brother. Like I'm happy to be here. It means a lot to me that you say this to me, because I'm so used to people just kind of like dismissing any input that I would have or anything that I would have to offer, and just not really being taken seriously. So it meant a lot to me that she would constantly validate me in this way and boost me up in front of other people publicly as like, basically like the heir to the throne, in a sense, like the person who, if one day, and these are things she's verbatim said to me, is like, if one day she really did decide, because she went to school for music, she like has a music background, a performance art background, and that was stuff that she really deeply loved and cared about, that if she ever did one day go back to that and decided to stop doing astrology, that I would be the person to carry on the work. And so to me, I'm just kind of like feeling like this legacy figure in the relationship and in the community of like, okay, well shit, like I gotta boss up. I gotta really like nail this down. I want to be good at this. I want to get it right. And that piece, I know for me and for my other sibs and for so many other people in the community, this piece about really wanting to get it right was sometimes the most important thing. In my opinion and from my perspective, like getting it right was more important than getting it right, and being right in general seemed like a really important thing to all of us, to the extent that it felt like she was the only person who really knew what was correct and what wasn't. And that kind of led to, this being something that's building up over the years as well, was this kind of this thing of all of us having put her up on this pedestal, right, and idolizing her in ways, and I would even argue deifying her in some ways sometimes, right? Like she's the only person, and a lot of this, like she's the only person who knows how this works, and this is the only source that we can get this information from. And Sorry, I'm seeing what y'all are saying in the chat and just trying to stay focused on my story, but I'll get to y'all in just a moment. But yeah, it was just like she had, on the one hand, if people say on lives or in these full moon parties or in sessions or whatever it was, asked her, like someone who's new to the crew, like, oh, like, how did you come up with this? Who did you study? What books did you read? Like, whatever, whatever. And the response was usually like, yeah, I came up with it all on my own. It's just like I woke up one day and spirit dropped it in my head, and then I found the language for it and gave it to you all. It was like, there is no source. I am the source. These are my original thoughts and ideas, and you can get my guide, you can get this, you can get that, and that's how you'll learn this framework. And all of us just kind of took that at face value, like, shit, okay, like it's not nothing I ever heard from anybody else before. And I think especially for people who were totally new to astrology, it's like, well, yeah, probably. I don't know I don't know anything else, so what the hell, sure. And I think for those of us who were closer to her, and even for me, like having been in so many conversations with her and kind of seeing her process, it was like, well, yeah, she really does just like sit and think deeply about a lot of these things. And it was like the language that we spoke to each other. Like we were always in the same way that I come on live and I talk to y'all, is like conversations that we would have with each other, and Madison can attest to this as well. Anybody who's my friend who talks to me outside of like the internet knows that this is just like, we're true to this. This is a part of who we are at this point. And so I believed it. I was like, yeah, probably, like she probably did just like sit and was getting these downloads, and it created this kind of culture of dependency on her, where this is the only person who, one, we can get the information from at all by going to her workshops, purchasing her content, doing this and that, but also the only person who can tell us if we're doing it right. And so if people would have like comments or suggestions or feedback or the way they were understanding something or ask questions, after a while it would start to seem like a lot of her responses, and I will own this too, a lot of my responses to people when I'm in the chat or people are asking me questions, or like some others in the community as well, like all of us started to get this kind of high and mighty, really kind of arrogant, condescending attitude of like, we're so like big and special, we came up with this shit, like we're using this shit, we're the people who are the best at it, and everybody else is dumb. Like, was that intentional? No, but that was just kind of the energy that I can own myself having, right? And like the energy that a lot of people felt that she had, and just the energy of the culture of that community in general started to get really just kind of snarky and condescending, and it would spill over into conflicts that would then happen on Twitter, mostly on Twitter, where we're like bashing tropical astrology and tropical astrologers, and we're like talking about how everyone who uses tropical astro is, this and that, and there's just a lot of shitty behavior going on. And some of it was because when you use the sidereal zodiac, like you're doing the different thing. Most people are using tropical astro, most people are doing pop astro, most people don't really take astrology that seriously. So for us, I know a lot of the reason why a lot of us, including her, felt that way was because nobody took us seriously, or at least we felt like nobody was really taking us seriously in the larger, broader astrological community. And we also thought that people were misusing astrology to basically perpetuate colonialism. And some of that I do still stand by because of the history of tropical astro, but we won't get into that here. But yeah, there were a lot of reasons why we felt this sense of like self-righteousness around divination for liberation and sidereal astrology in general. And it got to a point where a lot of us people who were followers of her work, again, put her up onto this pedestal as this person we needed to protect and defend at all cost. And I think, in my opinion, just saying how it looked, it seemed like a thing that kind of the power and the influence went to her head. If it went to my head, I'm certain it went to her head, right? And yeah, there would just be a lot of situations where if she said something the wrong way, like, whatever it was about, if she said something the wrong way, and people, how Twitter is, right? People would come for her and say, like, offering some people offering correction sincerely, but then some people also just like dunking on her constantly. It would lead to this just big back and forths that would like echo throughout the halls of Twitter for days sometimes. And it would lead to just a lot of this posturing and a lot of this stuff that, I don't know, all of us would participate in a little bit, in some ways in defense of her and in defense of sidereal astrology, but also just like, people just be wilding out on Twitter sometimes. And for the record, that's a lot of stuff that in hindsight, I feel a lot of shame about today. And that I feel was very, was just not a person that I wanted to be. But I also recognize that, and I've said this on lives before, being friends with Dana during that era for me was really empowering in some ways. This is going to sound kind of convoluted, but stay with me. It felt really empowering in some ways because she really wouldn't let people talk to her any type of way. She wouldn't let, she would just kind of unafraid to take up space in a particular way and just like kind of put people in their place. And like, I don't know, she just had a way about her that came off like she's not afraid to tell you exactly what she thinks. Whereas a lot of people like me and some other people in the community, we're just not that way. We really struggle to speak our minds exactly the way that we think it. We struggle with self-confidence. We struggled with, just like, dignity and self-respect and all of these other things. So to kind of be able to take on this energy of like, can't nobody tell me shit. And, the things that I have to say actually do matter and are worth listening to and paying attention to. And actually we are very smart and intelligent and have important things to offer. Like there's a combination of these things where, while as much as we were picking up really bad behavior, and encouraging really bad behavior, we were also learning it was kind of like embracing your shadow, right? Like sometimes you're a dick to people. Sometimes you are condescending. Sometimes you are rude. Sometimes, you don't portray yourself in the best light. But it doesn't mean that you're a wrong and bad person. It just means the way that you're going about trying to defend yourself or protect yourself or whatever it is not landing. It's not having the impact. It's not having a positive impact on people in a way that would facilitate a feeling of trust and mutual respect, and reciprocation and things like that. So it got tricky. And that started to become our reputation as sidereal astrologers and as divination for liberation especially. And in that era, it was kind of when we started getting cult accusations from other people. Like there was a specific incident where me and the Sibs were defending a comment that she'd made that came off ableist to people. And it led to a lot of like intracommunal conflicts that I was having a lot of one-on-one conversations with people. And it also led into some larger group conversations off to the side. And it was a moment where we all kind of doubled down on these ideas and then got to a point where we were like, okay, you know what? Maybe we were wrong. And I think this for me was the point where I started to kind of realize like, okay, I think I'm starting to behave in a way that I'm not cool with. And the other Sibs as well kind of felt the same way. And so this is where I'll jump in to say, like, I don't know if you guys saw my good friend Sidereal Maven, who's also in the chat with us, dropped a post on Instagram and on Patreon kind of talking about some of the reasons why they left the Div for Lib group. It's very, very strong, courageous piece, I think, and worth a read if you haven't read it yet. That is going to be more of Madison's specific journey, kind of like what I'm detailing here from their own perspective, and talks a little bit more about this kind of moment where we realize like, oh, like a lot of people are trying to tell us how we're being and we're just kind of refusing to listen and being kind of rude about it. So it's an excellent post. I recommend you go read it. But this post is basically like why I'm having this conversation with you now, because since then it's basically reopened the wound from this moment that that I do kind of want to talk about. So in summer of 2022, there was this, like I said, this moment where Dana said something on Twitter that came off ableist to a lot of other Black marginalized people, and they tried to call us in on it. Tried to call her in on it. She felt like she was misunderstood, and there was a lot of back and forth, and then it started to go into a weird place. So once it starts to go into a weird place, you know how Twitter is. At some point, me and the Sibs, we kind of saw what was going on, and we were like, okay, we probably know a little bit more what her intention was with this post and what she actually meant. And the post had something to do with like ADHD and like autism and more people coming forward with diagnoses, and like, is this a statement about capitalism or is this a statement about like actual mental health things? I don't remember exactly what it was, but it came off in a way that people took it as saying like, you know, ADHD and autism aren't necessarily as real as we think they are because it might just be a consequence of capitalism. Like, that's not what she said, in my opinion, but that's how people interpreted it. And it kind of spiraled into a bunch of different things. And so the three of us end up chiming in and coming to her defense. And then a lot of people came after us for that same reason. And then we all kind of just like couldn't understand why like we felt like people were misinterpreting us on purpose. I felt like, you know, it was likely a triggering thing for someone to say. So everybody just kind of stopped taking it at good faith and just went into the pylon because we have a history as a community of saying some fucked up shit sometimes. Maybe not to that extent, but just in general, like the way that we behaved online just wasn't a good look. So a lot of people didn't really have the best opinion of us. And we just were not really thinking about it at the time. And that led to a lot of conversations happening behind the scenes that ultimately, without getting into all the details, that ultimately led to a Zoom call between the four of us where we basically decided that Diff for Lib as a community was maybe not the right approach or something like that. How much of this do I want to reveal? Because the thing I'm hesitating with is like not trying to throw her under the bus as if this is something that we weren't actively participating in, but also like when you consider the power dynamics at the moment, it was kind of like being given instructions to change the narrative in a way that like, okay, Diff for Lib is not a community. Diff for Lib is more of a school of thought. And we are more so teachers or like philosophers or people who are teaching this school of thought and not necessarily community members. Because something that Dana and others would often say, you know, within these spaces, but also just online in general, is that, you know, the only people who can really hold you accountable are people who you're actually in community and in relationship with. So we bought into that, right? I'm sure many of you who were there also kind of bought into that. Like, yeah, well, I guess it does make sense. Like somebody can't really hold you accountable, because it was kind of a response to like cancel culture and a kind of just a response to like people on the internet who don't know you and who don't follow you and who don't know the nuances of the things that you say and all that other kind of stuff. You know, people can just come in out of left field and make assumptions about you without being curious at all about what you've said. And then they're trying to misinterpret your words or take your things out of context, you know, stuff that happens still to this day all the time. And so there was this kind of idea of like, you can't hold me accountable if like we're not in community with each other, if we're not in relationship with each other. And she would always say that like, you know, I have people in my personal life who hold me accountable. So I don't need you guys to do it, basically. And I remember hearing that being someone who is really close to her best friend, and trusted with many of her passwords, and shit like that, and kind of being like, mm, mostly asking myself, like, since I chimed in on that conversation saying like, hey, like, Dana's my friend, I would know if she was being ableist, I would know if she's being homophobic, I would know if she's being transphobic, whatever it is. And feeling like, do I feel like I could actually call her in on behavior if I felt like she was being out of line about something? And this is not, I don't know that this was something that I talked to other people about, or if me and the Sibs talked about it together, or like, I don't remember if this was like something I was consciously thinking at the time. This is me speaking in hindsight, but it's like, I do remember kind of having to ask myself, like, do I feel like I have the balls to actually like confront her on something if I feel like, she's out of line? And that also made me then have to reflect on a lot of other instances where she was doing something that I was uncomfortable with, and it, not that it necessarily directly had to do with me, but just like, whenever you're witnessing your friend do things that you wouldn't do personally, but that's just kind of how they are, so you just kind of let them do what they do. There were a lot of moments like that, and when I really let myself like recognize that I wasn't okay with that, then I started having to like question my own integrity of like, is this a relationship where I even feel safe to actually speak up if I feel like we're doing something wrong? Because then I started thinking about all of these times where, if she did bring something to me that was going on online, kind of basically expecting me to like agree or to co-sign or to egg it on or whatever. And a lot of times, to be honest, I would just kind of be like, yeah, girl, that's fucked up. Like, they shouldn't be talking about you like that. And, all this other stuff, and just kind of in defense of her. Cause I'm I was kind of being a yes man at the time. And I do remember there being a few instances where I was kind of like, well, I don't know. I kind of see where they're coming from, because, even if you didn't mean it this way, maybe it was being perceived like this, and this. And a lot of the times, basically just feeling like somehow I would always end up back on her side and feeling like she was in the right and she didn't do anything wrong. And this is, I just was kind of like, would I handle it that way? No, probably not. But that's how she is, and I can't control her, like, who am I? That was kind of my attitude towards it. So it was just like, that's just how she is, and at times that's also how I was, and didn't really want to see that in myself, but alas, there we were. So I think from that point is when the dissonance kind of started for me, because that incident, there were a lot of people that were involved, a lot of people that were really hurt by it. And then basically we came out of it on the other end, where after we had this like Zoom conversation and this kind of like reframing of what DifferLib was going to be moving forward. And for anybody who was there, this was the time period between that big full moon in Capricorn, when we had the really big, like, I had just moved into my new apartment and we were having the conversation about grief, and people got like, we're bringing really heavy stuff because on the same day as the full moon in Capricorn, in the middle of the summer of 2022, Saturn also re-entered Capricorn after being in Aquarius for like 2 months. So we had that big full moon party where everybody was bringing heavy stuff, and that was kind of our cue to be like, okay, we might need to kind of restructure the full moon parties and add in a little bit more boundaries, because people are bringing really big stuff that some of us weren't comfortable dealing with. And it was just an honest conversation we had off to the side. So we were trying to collaborate. And something really important that I do want to share about this that happened behind the scenes was a very specific statement from Dana to me in the Sibs, where she said, I feel responsible for you guys. I feel like you guys are, like, I don't know. We're all trying to eat off of doing this work. We're all offering services to kind of the same group of people. We're all hosting these spaces. We're all doing readings. Like, I feel responsible for you guys. And I feel like, I don't want us to cannibalize each other and kind of make it to where all of us can't eat. So what if we tried to collaborate? What if we tried to divide up the way that we do our services so that, if you want to do readings, cool, but then like maybe you host a workshop. Like it was kind of this idea of like, let's kind of get into business together, right? And like, let's all work together and do this thing. And all of us were like, hell yeah, like that sounds like a good idea, because we didn't want to compete with each other. We wanted to support each other and lift each other's work up, and to, do lives together, do Zooms together, to support the perspectives that the four of us all brought. But Dana, of course, recognizing that she's, in some ways the kind of leader and creator of this work, and then also the age gaps and everything else, power dynamics, like just kind of wanted to take us under her wing. And so I was like, okay, shit, like cool. We were all on board for it. And I think it lasted, what, if that was the full moon in Capricorn, then it would have been the full moon in Aquarius after that. And I think, Madison, correct me if I'm wrong if you remember, but I think by the time we got to the full moon in Aquarius, I don't remember if all of the ableism comment stuff happened before or after the full moon in Aquarius, but once we kind of had this discussion about like, okay, let's reframe diff for lib into being more of like a school of thought, then it was like, okay, a decision was made on her behalf to say, and I could be getting the details wrong on this, so bear with me, but I think a decision was made on her behalf to say like, okay, I'm not going to, maybe it's best that I don't go to the full moon parties anymore, and it can just be between the three of you guys hosting, because I think people look to me too much to like do whatever. And we were like, okay, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Like, should we say something about it? And then we just kind of, she didn't want to say anything about it. And yeah, there was a lot that just happened on this call that was kind of like, this feels dishonest. Like, this feels like we're being dishonest is just the best way that I can put it. And it's difficult for me to remember, but that sounds correct. She didn't want to be a part of the full moon parties after that. Yeah. Because of some of the things that happened off to the side and some of the other people who got involved and just a lot of other stuff, it was just, she kind of felt like, okay, people are too dependent on me, and don't need to be looking to me as like, whatever, this person. So like, let's just, I don't know. It felt like it started out being, hey, like, let's do business together. And then this incident happened where we all came to her defense and tried to vouch for her and like defended her publicly. And then some people got really upset about it. And then we had this conversation and we were like, oh shit, like people are really, looking to us to really bring us big stuff. And then she was kind of like, yeah, maybe this isn't actually such a good idea. So never mind. And from that point, I remember I felt a way about that, had a bunch of conversations with a lot of people off to the side. And then I publicly apologized on Twitter. And I said like, hey, I understand what everybody was trying to say now. Like, I'm sorry for the things that I said, whatever. And shortly after I posted that, I got a text from Dana, very long message that, long story short, said, and this not being the first time that she said something to me, but long story short, said something along the lines of like, I can see how much this is affecting you. And, my interpretation of it was like, we're two different people. The way I handle things is maybe not the way that you handle things. And like, I get that. And I don't want you to have to carry this burden. So maybe it's best that we start differentiating ourselves from each other. And this is maybe the second or third time that she said something to me about like, I should start to differentiate myself from her. And I just thought that was kind of odd because to my knowledge, she hadn't issued any kind of apologies publicly. She hadn't really said anything other than like, basically like, hey, this is not my responsibility. And I remember responding and just being like, yeah, I kind of agree, because in my mind, I don't think I said this, but in my mind, I was like, I really don't fuck with this. I don't fuck with this. I don't fuck with this. Um, but I didn't really know how to say that at the time to her. So I just kind of was like, yeah, that's probably for the best. So, um, and Madison also saying, because I know this is important to her. Side note, me and Madison have had so many conversations about all of this over the years and like contemplated so many times. Should we talk about this? Should we not talk about this? How do we talk about this? You know, and just never really knew what to do until this past weekend. So, she's saying, you know, for the record, after the Capricorn one, I realized I wasn't equipped to deal with the emotional turmoil that some people brought to the group that some people brought to their sharing time. I felt deeply affected by what people brought, but I had no idea how to respond or to help anyone. And so, yeah. And so basically, we have this conversation. I get this text from her of her saying, like, you know, maybe we should start to differentiate from each other. And I was like, yeah, cool. And then come to find out, I guess she never said anything to Madison or Elias either. So she kind of just like ghosted for all intents and purposes. And then the next full moon party that we had, that was just the three of us, she wasn't there. And we couldn't really say why she wasn't there. And what's funny about this, not how funny, but what's kind of funny about this and the timing of all of this coming out now with Saturn in Pisces is that was a full moon in Pisces party. And we just kind of couldn't talk about what was actually going on. And then they just didn't feel the same after that because it was like something had shifted between all of us where we were like, okay, so I guess it's just the three of us now. Like, sorry, camera going out of focus. I guess it's just the three of us now. What do we do? And I think we just stopped doing full moon parties after that because they just didn't feel right. And we also felt like a lot of people hated us. So I'm not going to hold you. Like, we felt like a lot of people hated us or a lot of people were upset with us. And mind you, like, this is the end of 2022. I lost a lot of business off of this. Madison lost a lot of business after this. Elias had a full-time job, but also lost a lot of business after this. And our reputations went to shit. This was also during the Mars retrograde in Taurus. That's how I remember, because I will always remember that transit as being the one that got me together. But it was like, damn, like this whole thing kind of just fell apart. And then from that moment, there was another incident that happened where, you know, the main context you would need to know about this piece of it is that all of us had just like stuck up for her online and in these various other relationships, only for her to kind of go and do this thing where she really centered a certain person on one of her things that was the person who was antagonizing a lot of us. And we just felt like, you know, wow, we really like put ourselves out there on a limb for you, like in a lot of ways damaged our reputations and lost business for you to turn around and like give so much focus and attention to this person who was like trying to make a fool out of all of us. We felt like, now that part is up for debate, but as far as what's relevant to this conversation, we felt really betrayed by her by that moment. And I was really upset about that. And so I brought it to her directly. And we beefed about it for a few days. And it was our first real like fight or conflict. And the way that conflict ended just didn't sit right with me because it felt like, again, that she was trying to evade accountability to us, even though she had just told us that she felt responsible for us. And so we all just kind of felt like mugged off by that whole situation. And I specifically felt like kind of honestly gaslit and manipulated by the way that conflict went. I didn't know at the time how to do conflict myself. This was pre-coaching school. So, you know, I can't sit here and say that I approached that conflict in the best way possible. I don't think that I did. I knew I was angry and I knew I needed to say something, and that if I didn't maintain my anger, I wouldn't say anything. But, you know, I don't necessarily agree with how I approached that conversation. But, by the end of it, I just felt like somehow she'd found a way to not actually apologize or hold herself accountable or to just be honest about anything that was going on. And maybe that was a difference in perspective or whatever between the two of us, but it didn't sit right with me. So I kind of took a lot of steps back after that. And from that point, I really was like, okay, whatever is going on here, I don't want to go down with the ship in this way. So I'm going to figure out a way to learn how to do client work specifically. And that was when I kind of started deciding, like, okay, if I'm not going to go back to school to get like a master's, I at least want to like try to get coaching. That may have been a suggestion that she made to me, like, oh, maybe you don't go back to school, but maybe you get coaching. That may have been a suggestion that she made. It may have been a suggestion that someone else made. I don't remember how I got to the decision, but I did make a strong decision at that point to say, I feel equipped emotionally to like hold people's big stuff. I don't have a problem with that, but I want to know how to do it in a way that is safe and that is responsible and that is as ethical as possible, because clearly we're doing something that is a little bit too reckless for me and for my comfort level. And if we're going to be using these deep psychological themes and getting into people's psyche, I was like, okay, I want to know how to do that in a way that I'm keeping people safe, because we're really dealing with people's heavy shit and I don't want to re-traumatize people, period. So I come early 2023 was whenever I found my coaching school. That was also around the time period where I decided to transition. Like, I made a lot of decisions very early 2023 where I was like, cool, I need to tune everybody else's voices out and I need to like move based on my own convictions, basically my own beliefs. And so, we kind of started distancing ourselves from each other. I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional or whatever, but she started having other friends and I, was with my homies and we were doing what we were doing. And I'm gradually starting to talk to her a little bit more as the dust kind of settles and we're starting to be friends again. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this coaching program. I think it's this guy whose podcast I've been following for a few years, and he really speaks to me, and it's easy for me to translate stuff that he's saying on this podcast to like, wounds and gifts and divination for liberation and everything else. It feels like a one-to-one translation in my brain. It feels really intuitive. So I'm going to go for it. And, I took out a loan. I paid however many thousands of dollars for this thing. I'm still paying off that loan. And, at the beginning of 2023, I was in a different place financially where I could actually afford to do this because I still had a savings account. I was doing okay with readings, but I wasn't doing great. But I felt like between that and, writing for Elizabeth's platform on the Atelier and everything else I was doing, I was like, okay, maybe I can sustain this. Mind you, January 2023 is when my Saturn return officially began. So little did I know 2023 would be the year where something happened every single fucking month. And like something happened every single fucking month. Anyway, so the first thing I did was transition. Or at least first thing I did was get on T. And that like immediately changed my psychology to where like I was very emotionally dysregulated, and 2022 was a very rough year where genuinely my health was in shambles the entire time. So starting to take tea kind of made me feel like a person again. Well, not kind of, it made me feel like a person again. And it also gave me a lot more confidence in a way that was just like, I felt a little bit less inhibited to just like speak my mind. So there would be times where in conversations with Dana, like she would say things to me that normally I would have kind of like skirted around, but I was just like, yeah, I don't know about that. Just like kind of pushing back. And that seemed to also kind of disrupt the dynamic a little bit too, where she would say like she was surprised that I was responding in certain ways. And part of that was because I had a chip on my shoulder and a lot of resentments that I hadn't communicated to her yet. But, it just was kind of that thing was going on. And then once I actually started coaching school in May was when like a lot of light bulbs started coming on like very quickly within the first probably 3 weeks of coaching school. Now, mind you, I had a lot of other personal life things going on. My mother was having cancer treatments. And that actually started the summer before, around the same time as that full moon party. So my mother had got diagnosed with cancer, was having cancer treatments. I was having health issues. And then come May, I get like 2 weeks into this program, and then my dog is sick and almost dies. And just all this stuff is happening. And so, but getting into coaching school, like made me start to think about things differently. And the first thing that I learned in coaching school, what I learned in boating school, is the first thing I learned in coaching school that really changed things for me, and also like gave me language for what I thought Jupiter in Aries was about, was personal responsibility. And personal responsibility, like many of you have heard me talk about on this channel a number of times, is that you take ownership for your part in something, and you taking responsibility for your part in something does not mean that you are the sole person to blame and the only person responsible. It's just taking ownership for what you contributed to whatever the thing is. And that kind of made me sit and think about a lot of my, it's a relationship school, so it made me think about my behavior in a lot of relationships, like personal dating relationships. And I was like, damn, I was kind of an asshole. And that was when I really started to realize, like, damn, I was kind of an asshole in a lot of different places, in the way that I was too Leo, too maybe hubristic, maybe too egocentric, maybe too just self-absorbed or self-involved to like really see and understand what the other person in the dynamic was dealing with, or whatever. So that kind of made me start seeing things differently. But then there was also just like, I don't know, more of the conversations that we were having in coaching school made me more skeptical about a lot of relationships that I was in, because the other piece of it is like, not just personal responsibility in terms of what you contribute, like what you've done wrong, or, how you've hurt the other person, but also how you're allowing yourself to be treated in relationships. It's not just the other person doing this to you. Sometimes it is, but it's not just the other person doing this to you. Sometimes there's a part of you that is getting something from this dynamic that you supposedly say that you don't like to be in, that is keeping you there. And you have to take ownership of that part as well, so that you can realize what it is that you think you need from that dynamic and get it from somewhere healthier than the dynamic that you're in. And that really made me feel like, holy shit. And there was a practice that they had us do called the 180, which is actually the foundation of my shadow work readings. If you've had a shadow work reading with me, this is where this comes from, where the 180 is, okay, anything that you are projecting onto someone else, anyone that you're projecting onto somebody, anything that you start projecting onto somebody else that is like a blaming or shaming or whatever thing, is something that you likely need to own in yourself. And sometimes it's good things and sometimes it's bad things. And so we had to do this exercise. This is like later in the summer. We had to do this exercise where you pick a word that is really charged for you. And for me, the word was arrogance, because that's something that I've been called before that I really didn't identify with. And I was like, I'm like the least, I could stand to be more arrogant at times, is what I thought. So I was like, okay, fuck it, like arrogance. And then you go through the exercise and you're basically trying to understand, like, okay, so who is somebody who you think embodies this phrase? So you think of a person. And then you say, what are some ways that you feel like you've witnessed them do this? And I could be getting this exercise wrong, but it's roughly like, what are some ways that you think that they do this? And you write down all of, like, you're supposed to give like 20 examples. And then you say, okay, what are some ways that you have been this thing? And I'm like, so then you have to really dig deep and say, what are some ways that you have been arrogant? So I'm like, oh, okay, well, like this, like this, like this. And then I realized how much I was talking about different lib stuff. And I was like, oh shit. And then there's a question that says, how do you, if you weren't behaving in this way, is it if you weren't behaving, if you, there's like a question that says something like, okay, let's say that you were never this way. If you were never arrogant, what would be the drawbacks of you never being arrogant? And I was like, what? Okay, I don't know. So I would like write down, okay, what are some ways that, like, some drawbacks of not having some arrogance? It's like, well, I guess maybe I wouldn't think very highly of myself. Maybe I wouldn't be very confident. Maybe I would be afraid to take risks, talking to my own Mars and Leo, right? Maybe I would be afraid to use my voice, or maybe I wouldn't take myself very seriously. Like, just all of these things of like, okay, what is the drawback of not being arrogant? And then you're supposed to say, what is the benefit of being arrogant so that you can really understand like how is this behavior actually working for you. And then it was like going into that whole thing. So that just kind of made me sit with it. Like it took a lot of the shame and the power out of this phrase, but it also made me actively reflect on the ways that I was actually being that way, despite thinking that I wasn't. And from that point, I kind of realized like, oh, I've been taking on, well, one, I've been living in my shadow a lot without realizing it. I've also taken on too much of, I've become somebody that is not true to the person I would like to be. Or, I've become a version of myself that is not fully in alignment with the person that I need to be doing this work, first off, but also just like I was just out of alignment, is my point. In the course, they called it your true north, right? And so I was like, I'm out of alignment. And then another exercise they had us do had something to do with like, okay, if you're going to complain about this person that you're in a relationship with more than twice or, whatever, then that's a sign that you need to do something about this relationship because you obviously don't like being in it. And that's when I was really like, oh, shit. So I had to ask myself, like, okay, I kind of realized, oh, I don't feel, through a lot of the things that I learned, thinking I'm in this course for like romantic relationships, and then a lot of it just ends up coming back to my relationship with Dana. I realized, like I've discussed before, like I don't feel safe in this relationship, and me not feeling safe in this relationship, whether it's because of her, because of me, like if I'm taking personal responsibility for my part in it, I don't feel safe in this relationship because I haven't always maybe spoken my truth or like been honest with myself or been honest with her or been honest with other people. Like there are just a lot of ways that I noticed I was being dishonest, that I was maybe not fully speaking my mind or advocating for myself or saying when things made me uncomfortable or saying when I disagreed with things or just whatever. There were a lot of ways that I found myself just kind of submitting to a lot of behavior that I just didn't fucking agree with. And I didn't like that. And so the more that I sat with that, and the more I started having other people come to me and say like, hey, I know you started doing coaching school. Well, that's really interesting because Dana has started offering what she calls therapeutic coaching sessions with people. And I was like, that sounds oddly specific. Now, in good faith, I will say that, do I know 100% that Dana was copying me? No. Is it possible that it was a coincidence? Maybe. But from a lot of other behaviors that I had witnessed over the years, and for a lot of other personal experiences that I had that I witnessed other people have, I had reason to believe early in the year that, yeah, 2 weeks after I say I'm going to start doing a coaching training, she's suddenly marketing her services as therapeutic coaching sessions. That pissed me off. I'll be honest. It completely pissed me off because it's like, dude, like this is the summer that I tore my Achilles. This is the summer that my fucking dog died. This is the first summer of my Saturn return. This is the first summer that so many different things had happened where I really needed, look, one, I was trying to differentiate myself like she told me to do and trying to go off and do my own thing. And then here she comes behind me doing the exact shit that I was doing, whether that was her idea or someone else's idea or whatever it was. I was like, bro, how am I supposed to differentiate myself from you if you're doing the same shit that I'm doing when I've told you for years that I wanted to do this with astrology? Like, what the fuck? And I just felt like I at first I felt like I was crazy. I was like, okay, surely I just gaslit myself about it. I was like, am I copying her? Or is she copying me? Is anybody copying anybody? So I'm having conversations with a lot of other people about it. And I'm like, okay, these conversations happen during this time frame. This newsletter was released during this time period. This happened and this happened. Am I crazy? And they were like, and then there would be times where other people are listening to her on live or whatever it is that she's doing, her tweets, this and that. And they're like, this sounds a lot like, whatever. And so what makes this difficult for me to talk about, and what has made this difficult for me to finally just come out and say, is the fact that like we were so enmeshed over the years, over the course of 5 or 6 years, so enmeshed, so close, having conversations, 24 hours at a time. And for me, I just took it as like this thing that we were doing together. I just took it as like, I don't necessarily need the credit as long as the idea gets out there. She has the bigger platform, she has more influence, whatever. As long as the ideas get out there, I don't really care if I get the credit for it. Like, I'm not really in this for the credit and the notoriety. I just want to help people. And after a while, it took a lot of people close to me being like, no, dude, like you should get your shine too. And the irony of it being Dana herself being one of the people who would constantly tell me, like, based on stuff in my own chart, like, you have a lot to offer. You have a lot of significant things to say. Like, trust yourself, put yourself out there, this and that. Like, don't let people play in your face, basically. And so I'm having this moment where I'm like trying to decide, is she really stealing from me, or am I being uncharitable? I just had this, but my gut just kept feeling like this is, even if she doesn't realize that she's doing it, I think we're too enmeshed, or we've been too enmeshed, that we really don't know whose ideas are whose at this point. We don't know who inspired what ideas, where these ideas came from. I do my best anytime that I share anything to say, I was having a conversation with this person. This is what we talked about. This is what they said. This is what I said. These are the conclusions that we drew, because to me, ideas are collaborative. They're co-creations. And especially when dealing with spirituality and spiritual stuff, like in astrology, especially, where it's been around for centuries and decades, like everybody has put something into the collective consciousness. And, depending on what you believe spiritually, we all kind of draw from that well. But for Dana, for several years, she's always had this thing about people in the broader, larger astrological community won't cite her, won't say her name, won't give her credit for her work. And mind you, this is the same dogma, if you will, that we bought into with Div for Lib that made us defend her all the time, because it was like, yeah, that's really fucked up. You're coming up with these really unique ideas that we haven't heard anywhere, and you're really not getting your shine for it. We think you're great. We think this shit is great. It works. We want people to know about it, and we want you to get your credit. And so it's just like, one of the reasons why people would accuse us of being in a cult was because people would constantly tell us, like, hey, y'all aren't the only people to use the sidereal zodiac. Y'all aren't the only people to think about houses and signs and planets in this way. She did not invent sidereal astrology. And we were like, yeah, we know she didn't invent it, but this specific way of talking about it is unique to her and blah, 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 blah. This was a thing for years that we would debate about, and that a lot of people would just flat out block us and stop talking to us about, because she would just get so indignant about it. And so would we. And so it's just like, I was always concerned, when I get to this point of trying to differentiate myself, I was always concerned that one day, if I really were to cut myself off from her and keep doing my thing, because to me, this is like, again, this is a language that we spoke together. This is something that I know for a fact I contributed to, that I on a daily basis helped go back and forth and refine, from hours and hours on FaceTime together to monstrously long text threads, like just every conversation that we had, contributing to her ideas, and never fully knowing exactly what I contributed and what I didn't. Like I couldn't tell you today exactly what was mine and what was hers. I can't. I know there are some things that I do distinctly feel like, yeah, she definitely came up with that on her own. And those are the times where I do try to say, yeah, this is something Dana used to say, right? Or like whatever. This is something from Wounds and Gifts, because it's something that, I haven't maybe elaborated on just yet on my own. But there are also things that to this day, 2025, that I have absolutely sat and thought about myself without her that are mine today. And everything else in between, I firmly believe, are co-creations between the two of us, but that she is now taking full credit for. And if she wants to do that, fine. I don't really care. I'm here because I like helping people. It brings me the most joy to help people. And I'm also just some guy. Like, most of my Twitter followers at this point aren't even astrology related. They're COVID cautious people. It's COVID cautious Twitter at this point. My books are closed right now. Like, I was barely even doing that many readings to begin with until I started doing lives on here again. And then the whole struggle that month in October when I came on here and was like, it's really hard for me to just come on here and speak my mind. A lot of that was because of the fear of her retaliating and saying that I'm stealing her ideas and stealing her work and plagiarizing and this and that. So it was just hard for me to trust myself to come on here and just fucking talk about astrology and it not be that big of a deal. Now, granted, the time period that I finally decided to cut off our relationship was August of 2023. This is like after I had my Achilles surgery and I'm posted up at my parents' house, unable to walk. And I just decided after conversation after conversation after conversation that the day that Mercury stationed retrograde in Leo, that I was going to send her an email and I was just going to say straight up, like, thank you. In short, like, thank you for everything that you've taught me. I've appreciated our relationship up to this point. However, I do feel betrayed by you in the way that you've started doing coaching sessions at the same time that I've always told you I wanted to do coaching sessions. Whatever. I think it's best that we part ways. It was like an amicable split. My friends have also read the email and said themselves that it was actually pretty neutral and direct. Like, it wasn't mean. Because at that point I'd been in coaching school. So I knew a little bit better how to conduct myself, but I made a decision for myself that I didn't want this to be a dialogue between the two of us, because quite frankly, I didn't trust myself to stand my ground through a dialogue if we had one. And I also just didn't trust her, to be honest, at the end of the day. So yes, I sent her an email and I blocked her on everything, and I have not talked to her since. Now, was this the right way to go about that? I don't know. It was what I did with where I was at that time, and it just is what it is. I'm not necessarily proud of it. It's not something that felt good to me, but it was something that felt necessary for me to just get out of that relationship, because if you know me, it's hard for me to leave relationships. I'm a Capricorn. Like, when I'm with you, a Capricorn and a Scorpio, bitch, like, when I'm with you 10 toes down. And even if I don't really want to be with you sometimes, I'm still talk myself into staying. So it was just very important to me to sever ties. And especially after being told so many different times to differentiate myself, like, that was my moment. I did allow her to respond once, and I did read it, and then I didn't say anything else after that. And I do remember the response that I got was basically her denying it and saying like, yeah, well, that's not in my character to do that. If you knew me, you wouldn't have accused me of that. But I do understand that you need to go do your own thing and differentiate yourself from me. So, best of luck to you and whatever. And I was just kind of like, that also felt shitty, but such is life. So that was the beef between the two of us. And then from that point, yes, there were absolutely a couple of months where I probably said some shady things online, where I maybe alluded to saying some petty things. Like, I had my little somewhat public temper tantrum, and along the ways have maybe said some less than charitable things, even if I didn't directly use her name. And I own that. Like, I was, being petty. But I never really talked about any of this stuff. And it just always felt like a risk that if I was going to bring this up, I'm potentially opening the door to who knows what. And I still feel that way talking to you about this right now. Like, who knows what comes out after this? Shit that maybe I don't remember, and times that maybe I wasn't very great of a person or whatever, which is why I'm trying to say up front, like, yeah, there were probably times where I wasn't in alignment with um the person that I am now. And I try to give myself the grace to say, like, there are a lot of reasons why I was in my wound for a lot of that relationship, right? Or in my shadow. So I don't condone it. Obviously, I'm not proud of it, but um it is what it is. And I apologize for like all of that shit. I've apologized many times to people directly anyway, but like the biggest thing that I really do feel bad about is leaving everybody in the dark and just not leaving everybody in the dark, and also just like behaving that way so many times and just not, I don't know, not apologizing, right? Like not I don't know, just not being better, right? And the other thing being, like, the reason why all of this is coming up and even why Madison posted what they posted is because Dana did actually call me out on was it the Sunday or the Monday after the Pisces eclipse? If you follow her on Blue Sky still, she posted a very long and very mean thread about me out of the fucking blue. And I would own it if I had done something, said something, done whatever to provoke this. I have been minding my business ever since sometime last year, because it just, once I finished coaching school, I just kind of felt like a lot of the bitterness, like, I don't know, I have a lot more empathy and compassion and understanding for myself, for her, for everybody else involved, because like I knew her intimately enough that I could make sense of a lot of her behaviors, like, so it was never like I wanted to villainize her or scapegoat her or like defame her or do any of these things in a public way that would like jeopardize her business, her ability to feed her kid, or just anything like that, because I don't think she's a bad person. I don't think I have respect for her and her humanity, and I do think her framework and her way of thinking of astrology is fucking brilliant. Like, still to this day. And so, like, I never wanted to speak ill of her in a way that, by revealing a lot of this information, was going to just, be petty and shady and make her look bad for the sake of making her look bad, because that's not the point. But at the same time, for me and for the other astrologers to have to hold this, to carry this and the shame and the burden of it all ourselves, and like being harmed by it ourselves, and recognizing that a whole community of people were harmed in so many different ways by the very people who constantly preached about community, just didn't fucking sit right with any of us. So it was like, how, what do we do? And a lot of the times we were just afraid that she would retaliate. Like, the thread that she wrote about me was verbatim things that I had already imagined that she would potentially say if she ever did say something about me, because my biggest fear is that, somebody who helped me would perceive me as being ungrateful, or perceive me as being arrogant or hubristic or whatever, um because I decided that our relationship wasn't working out for me and leaving. It's like this eighth house guilt, shame that I have, because she did a lot for me. She bought me the webcam that I'm using right now. She bought me the software, the Astro software that I use on my laptop. I did go to her house in New Orleans in 2020, 2021, and spend, a few days with her learning how to do solar returns. Like, these are all things that happen in ways that she directly, she did shout me out on her lives. She did boost me and help me build my clientele and did all of these things. She gave me a lot of visibility and publicity that helped me have a business and become Mixed Mercury, the Astro Himbo. Like, absolutely. She helped, she contributed to that. And I am grateful for that. And I did tell her that. And also, I deserve just as much credit and respect and dignity and fucking something. I don't know. I deserve just as much. I don't know. I deserve to take credit for my own shit, first of all. and for my own growth and for my own ideas and for my own intentions of what I wanted to do with this work and what it's turned into for me. I deserve credit for my own fucking influence. I deserve credit for my own work. I deserve credit for my own mind and my own ideas and for all of what I also helped contribute to her, because as much as she helped me, I also fucking helped her. It just seems like only one of us is big enough to say that it went both ways. So yeah, that pissed me off. Because it's just like, why? What does it do for you when I am just minding my own fucking business? Like, I have not said something negative about you in so long. And even if I did say something negative, I didn't really. I mostly talked about the experience of Div for Lib feeling like a cult, because it did. And that's its own separate conversation of, all of us kind of being in this way that was not really very, not really very forgiving, but we were the people who were leading those spaces. And so that's why I feel like, yeah, I have to take some responsibility for that. It's not just everybody was behaving in this way towards us and I was being good. No, I kind of also promoted that behavior, and I think it's fucking gross. And that's why I stopped and went and got some fucking training, and why I'm in therapy and have been in therapy for the last 4 years and finally getting into some deep stuff. Like, it's just like, I'm doing the work. And she can write a thread and say that, I'm biting off her shit, and that, my guide is copying hers, and that I'm, whatever, that I'm stealing her ideas and this and this and that, whatever. She can say all of that if she wants to. She can say that I feel entitled to her shit. And honestly, I do, because I was there. We were in the trenches together. Yeah, maybe you had the extra 14, 15 years of astrological study, but I was there with you when you were developing a lot of this shit. It's also mine. Sorry. You can disagree with me. We can fight about it. Well, actually, no, we can't, because I'm not talking to you, but I do claim some ownership over this work too, but it's not because I need to profit off of it and get rich off of it and have a booming business where I'm, doing interviews and doing all of this shit. Like, I, again, don't care about any of that. It's not about that for me. It's never been about that for me. It's been about you guys for me. It's been about the feeling, the euphoric feeling I get sitting and listening to you guys, like, connect the dots of your own life and to start to believe yourself and take yourself seriously and find your voice and find yourself and find your hearts and become the best version of yourself, the most aligned version of yourself. Like, that's all I care about. I don't care who said it. I don't care if y'all take everything that I say and then go and tell it to somebody else and you never cite me and never send anybody to me. I don't care. That's also why I went and got a fucking job. I mean, part of that was because, like, I needed the money and astrology was not feeding me anymore. But I also, this started out as divination for liberation. Like, the people that we help are a lot of people who can't afford $200, $300, $400, $500 readings. Like, do I think I'm worth a lot? Yeah, absolutely. But this work and the nature of it, and even what I believe about therapy and psychology and like counseling and shit like that, is that it needs to be accessible to people. And once it started getting to a point where, in order for me to eat, I needed to charge, $200, $250 for an hour-long session, like, that's not sustainable for you. That's not sustainable for me. That's not, to me, that's not decolonial. That's not liberation. It's not helping the people that it needs to help if it's only helping people in a certain tax bracket, And like, I know that for her, this is not me trying to be like backhanded as much, because I know for her that was also something that she wrestled with. But she makes the decisions that she makes, and I made the decisions that I make. And for me, if I'm going to do this, I want to be able to do it in a way that, people can actually, like, I can't do the work if nobody can work with me. I can't do the work if nobody can afford to sit down with me. I can't do the work if, the economy and the world around us is collapsing and, I got to run a business. Like, I just don't have the same entrepreneurial get it out the mud spirit that a lot of people do. That's just not me. And that's something I've had to accept over the last couple of years as well, is that I'm just not that guy. If I were to be a person who did that, I need a team, because I need an admin assistant and I need an editor and I need like a whole bunch of other things that I just wouldn't feel right about hiring people to do that and not being able to pay them like at all or adequately for doing it. Because, what do I look like taking all of the money and then just like asking y'all to trade with me or something like that? I don't know. So there's just a lot of moral and ethical conflicts that have come up for me doing this work, that I want to do the work. I just want to do it the right way. So yes, I went to coaching school, put myself into debt for coaching school, not knowing I would tear my Achilles later that year and then have to pay off a bunch of medical debt, and not be able to work. I went back to in-person jobs so that, whatever, I'm doing what I can to get back into doing this in a way that's sustainable and that works for all of us. And I'm fucking proud of that, and I claim that. And anything else, my word and my story against hers and whatever else, you can take from this whatever you want to take. If you want to keep consuming her content, by all means, have at it. But I haven't felt right about a lot of this and leaving people in the dark. And it sucks when you can't advocate for yourself either. And you can't talk about the shit that's happened to you, knowing that you still have a lot of people that you really care about who are potentially still involved with something that just may not be what it seems, And I know that's a bold thing to say, but that's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. Again, it just is how I feel. And it's more out of protection for you guys, and also just like, also, this is gonna sound weird, but also kind of out of love for her. I think I told y'all that like um love is support and challenge. And I do think me walking away was part of just kind of like saying that, like, hey, if you keep behaving this way, you keep treating people this way, like, you're not gonna have very many people around. And it's not that I don't want to be around you or find value in this relationship, but it's hurting me and it's hurting a lot of other people. So, it's sometimes people won't know the impact of their actions until they experience some kind of at least social consequence for that. And I don't say that as a way that everybody needs to go and like attack her or go do any of that shit. Like, that's not my point in this. But like, if I step on your toe and nobody says ouch, I'm never going to know that it hurt you to step on your toes. That kind of thing is what I mean when I say that. So it's just kind of like, and whatever consequences happen for me too, if I don't know, if something else happens and then you find out something about me that you don't like, you're more than entitled to do what you want to do with that information. I'm something about me is that I'm just this way about everything that I do, that I feel like I'm really hard on myself. So I'm always worried that like I was behaving in a way that, that I may have been behaving in a way that was, not up to my own standards. And then I worry about like forgetting about it and then somebody else bringing it back up and now I'm exposed or some shit. When in reality, I don't really be doing shit like that. I don't think. I don't know. Y'all can tell me, but I think it's just the Leo humiliation wound paranoias. But anyway, I try to be honest and I try to be authentic and I try to be in some ways like objective, even though there's no real way to be objective about all of this because people remember things differently and interpret things differently. But that's my side of the story, and because of my position in the community and in this side of the astro of it all, like it really has felt like I owe it to all of you guys to at least just say what happened and to be willing to carry whatever the consequences of that are, because ultimately, like, whatever happened to me, like, it also happened to y'all. And um I've always said that I want you guys to feel like you can trust me. I want you guys to feel like you're safe with me. I want you guys to feel like I wouldn't lie to you or deceive you or manipulate you or just use you, you know? Because those are all ways that I've been made to feel, and that's just not the culture that I want to create, and that's not a reputation that I want to have or that I want astrologers to have. And I know it doesn't all fall on me, but um, I do recognize that, like, yeah, I was a big part of all of that. So if you are someone who has felt hurt or harmed by my behaviors in the past, or things that I've said, or just ways that I've conducted myself, like, I am truly sorry for that. And I do apologize. And I also deeply, deeply appreciate all of the grace and patience that many of you, especially folks who are older than me, like, a lot of the patience that you've had for me. Um, and just like being willing to stick around and like give me the benefit of the doubt, or give me, or to have confidence or faith that eventually I would do the right thing, because I really, really fucking care about my impact on other people, and I really care about this work. And um yeah, and I care about y'all. Like, y'all don't realize how much just being around, like, knowing that you guys exist, even if it's just in my phone, has sincerely kept me alive over the last handful of years. Like, and I don't say that lightly. Like, I deeply mean that. Um, Many of you have also informed my ideas, and helped me refine my own thoughts and beliefs and things like that through the readings that we've done and the conversations that we've had personally as well too. And so again, for me, it's always a co-creation. Um it's always you guys give to me just as much as you maybe feel like I give to you. And that's why I don't have a problem with going live every Sunday for free, for hours and hours, or for, answering questions or just whatever it is, because um y'all are real people to me. And the other thing that really kind of landed this all for me is like, no, I have to talk about this, is when I was talking to Madison and Samaje and Jada and everybody else, Deb and everybody else who's reached out, um, is that, this was your real life too. Like, this was not just us trying to be business owners and whatever else, like creators and this and that. Like, this was your real life too. Like, Differlib and those full moon parties and those spaces, support groups, workshops, those were real for you. That was your real life. Those were real, um, deeply vulnerable and intimate experiences for you as well. And I just want you all to know that it was real for me too, and I take that incredibly seriously. And it was real for Madison too. I don't know if she's still here, but I know for a fact it was real for Madison too. Madison also felt so deeply, deeply unsettled by all of this as well. And yeah, so anyway, um, yeah, that's what happened. I don't think there was anything else that I really needed to say. But I do want to see what you guys said in the chat while I was talking, because I just talked for 2 hours and didn't respond to chats. So, yeah, and Malia has been having existential crises. Like, when I tell y'all, so many people. Like, I hope that me talking about this and Madison talking about this and whoever else maybe says something in the comments or replies or whatever, like, I hope everybody feels liberated to some extent as well from this. Of, if it messed with your relationship with astrology too, or your ability to trust yourself, or just whatever it is, like, I hope that this provides some kind of validation and relief and something for you too. And I again do deeply, I wish Dana all the best. Um and I do, as much as I have my anger and my resentments and my frustrations towards her, like I don't wish anything bad on her. I don't want her to suffer, you know. Um so I just hope, as my friend Eric said, I just hope that everybody involved can get what they need to heal and feel better and move on. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna read what you guys said in the chat. And shout out to everybody who just made it back, who had to step out. Okay. For Deb, it was the first time astrology made sense to me, and I loved the political approach. I remember it being the only place initially where there were people taking it seriously. A therapy group I was involved with turned into a cult, in part because everyone initially felt deeply understood by the leaders and things got real weird, but it was very seductive. Very, very true. Relatable content. She said on multiple occasions on live that she was planning to move away from Astro as her full-on job and pass on Div Lib to you as her protege or heir. Yes, that is true. True. All the full moon parties, yeah. Full moon parties were lit. They were very emotionally demanding, but they were lit. And from my psych perspective, it is really useful, and I still use it. Your own contributions and support of her in conversations was an inextricable part of that framework taking form the way that it did. Thank you for that. That part, moving into therapy land without training or licensure is ultimately what made me uncomfortable. Yeah. I have to jump off, but I will be back for the replay. I know talking about this isn't easy for you or for Sidereal Maven, but it's important that you are. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Dipping off to get some lunch. Glad you're getting this off your chest. It's been eye-opening for me personally how easy it is to get swept up into cult dynamics the past 5 years. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for being here. I appreciate that. I thought she was sitting at her altar getting these downloaded from the spirits. That's how it sounded to me. And that may have been true. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't physically there for that, if that was happening, but you know, that kind of, it happens for all of us, right? Sometimes you just get an insight and you're like, oh, and then go off on it. But yeah. She said this work was to help us take ownership of our own astrology practice and observations and not need forever to outsource our validation and knowledge. That's also true. I had a friend in psychology who wanted to be famous, and one day I realized she wanted fans and not friends and pieced out. I love when people say what they think, but it can't be one way. Very, very true. Very true. I remember the thing about you can't hold me accountable unless you're in community. Yeah. Yeah. That's what made me uncomfortable as a licensed psychologist. It's heavy shit and the boundaries get blurry if there's no licensure to back people up. When I was a therapist, I used my own therapy a lot. Same. That's what I liked about, that was really the main appeal of the coaching school that I went to. And for full transparency, I don't know if they're fully accredited just yet with whatever the larger coaching industry is, but the founder himself has a lot of credentials. He's got several degrees and background and stuff. And what I liked about the program was, I know they're in the process of getting accreditation, but what I liked about the program was that the first like 6 months of it are for you to do the work on yourself. And then the second 6 months of it, you start working with clients, but you always have people holding you accountable. Like you're working directly with the established teachers who are coaching everybody. And then you also have your classmates who you're supposed to do check-ins with, and you get a lot of hours in. I do think coaching in general as a field can be a little sketchy. So if that's something that you're interested in, like definitely vet your your leaders or your programs or whatever, because yeah, coaching in other like kind of unregulated fields like that, they can also get kind of culty too. That was definitely something I was like very hyper vigilant about in my course. And I was like, okay, I know I'm going to absorb a lot of this stuff, but I want to make sure that I'm not becoming it. And so I really haven't been involved with them very much since then, just because there were some things that I didn't like very much or didn't fully agree with. And some things that I'm like, I see what you're saying, but I'm going to reframe that in a way that works for Black and brown people, stuff like that. So decolonizing psychology is not an easy feat either. And yeah, it's tricky when you're also dealing with capitalism. So something else. Just because somebody says they're a coach doesn't necessarily mean everything that it should mean. So yeah. We co-create literally everything because we are a social species. No one is in a bubble or a pedestal separate from the body of knowledge produced by all of humanity. Hey, Eric. There are no new ideas, only new ways of making them felt. That part. Yeah, I went from being a political astrologer to posing as a therapeutic coach. Yeah, didn't quite like that personally. Life coaching with zero training is a big no for me, and everyone I know who has done it has gotten in big trouble eventually. Yes. And a lot of those people are also like now some of those make America healthy again type people. Like, it's a slippery slope, friends. It's a slippery slope into the alt-right if you're not careful. Especially when things like ableism and patriarchy and all this other kind of stuff like falls into play. You really gotta stay woke when you're in those spaces. Catching up with the replay, but as a silent follower since 2020, I appreciate you speaking up and bringing some clarity to what happened. Something started to feel off, but I couldn't tell what. Yeah, I didn't want to give y'all that Pisces experience like that anymore. As an activist, that's one of my main resentments, is that this is our real lives, and she said that she wanted to help. Yeah, that call out was the night. It started the night before Trans Day of Visibility. Or was it the night of? Either way, I was like, now why am I in it? Baby, my mouth was agape. I was so shocked. As someone who was in a cult, I don't think you're wrong. Never mind. Gotta go. We'll catch up later. Thanks for your bravery and vulnerability to share. Also proud of you for taking pride in your contributions to the framework. Thank you. That's not easy for me to do. I'm probably gonna what's it called? Ruminate over it for the rest of the day. Or especially tomorrow whenever I wake up and realize, oh no. Or maybe I'll just feel better. I don't know. I had to before I decided to actually talk about this, I had to really ask myself what I was afraid of. And I was like, I think I am just afraid of actually like saying, yeah, I do feel ownership over this, because that feels like a scary thing to do when you don't necessarily have tangible evidence. Speaking of Virgo moon, but that's also why in my guidebook I said, these ideas are some of my own, along with principles from Hellenistic astrology and divination from liberation and so on and so forth. Because it's like, a lot of this shit is stuff that you can just Google. I just put it into a cute little document for you that Emilia edited and made beautiful and consumable. Like, it's not that these are my ideas and I'm the only person who's ever thought like this. Like, no, it's just, here's a convenient little guidebook for you to become your own astrologer. That's it. That was the whole intention of it being a sticker journal versus me giving y'all versus me actually biting off her shit and giving y'all whole descriptions of what the month ahead would look like with calendars and this and that. Like, no, I actually don't want to do all of that. I'm not interested in all that. I want to help other people. And it was actually Emilia's idea as well. The bullet journal thing was actually Emilia's suggestion of like, yeah, it'd be really cool to have like a kind of bullet journal with astro stickers, so that whenever you're journaling, you don't have to think about the transit as much as just like know that there was a transit on that day or around that time and use it as a way to put stuff together. So I was like, oh, well, I'm down with that. And they were like, so you're the one with like the business and the social media following those, so you have to release it. And I was like, okay, well, you also have to take 50% credit of it with me, because I'm not gonna I'm not gonna act like I came up with this. You came up with this. So if anyone was wondering, the guide and its design was an Emilia Kanagawa production. Okay, I'm just the face and some of the guidebook organization and ideas. Co-creation. Okay, what else is in here? Praise cure. You deserve grace because you give a true fuck about people. Thank you. Appreciate knowing more context, extending grace to you. Thank you. Oh, I've always had faith in you from my old age space. Thank you. It shows your sincerity is felt. You brought us out for this. Thank you for unfolding and sharing. That was the other thing too. I was really like, I don't have like, what the beautiful thing about Madison's post is that Madison is a writer and a storyteller, and a really good one at that. Which they do have a poetry book, by the way. If you haven't read it or seen it or purchased it, maybe you should consider. But Madison's post was so well written and just like such a good story, and and I know just how much thought and consideration they put into that I also was starting to put pressure on myself of like, damn, I don't know if I could do that. But then Madison reassured me like, yeah, you seem to do better when you just say things off the cuff, and I think it'll resonate regardless. So just say what you need to say. And I had to trust that, even though I was worried that it would come off messy or that it would sound like I was being messy, and I don't want to be messy, but the reality is this shit is messy. Like it just it was a mess to experience. It was a mess to witness. So like, if it's messy, then it's messy, but that's just kind of the truth of the situation. I also just had to accept that, it is what it is. Thank you, Jim. We've all been having existential crises over this shit. It was real, and I was disturbed by the end of it all. Cause yeah, it's easy to dismiss it as like internet drama or whatever. And that just, to me, wouldn't have been honest. That would have been gaslighting a lot of people to just say like, yeah, it was just some like niche internet group. Like that's not true. That's not fair to anybody, and it's just not true. So made it back for the end. Thank you for your transparency. I resonate with this deeply. It's been sad for me in the oh no, not again way, because I'm older. Yeah, I want people to apply the lessons for real. And apparently moving into midwifery land without training or community, I don't know nothing about that, but I hope that there is some system of accountability involved with that. And I own that shit because I'm the one who loves bullet journaling for years, and that's what this was, period. There you go. Exactly, friend. Period. Wish I purchased that guide. It looked fab. I might have one or two left. But you know what? There is a digital one. I mean, the digital one is about to expire because we were supposed to design it by Jupiter signs and Jupiter transits. Jupiter moves into what's it called? Gemini next month, but I don't know, maybe if we get some time we'll do a digital one, because doing the physical one was very expensive and impractical. So that's not happening again, especially with these tariffs. But bye Jada, thank you. I think a digital one, I don't know, Emilia, we can chat if we want to just update the dates on the digital one, maybe. And have people can have that and just print it off or whatever for next year. It was kind of a pain in the ass to do, but I have the transits, so I don't know. Your work has always sat very well with me. You should take pride and ownership over it, and thank you for your vulnerability and bravery. Thank you. Thank you. You are so welcome, friend. Of course. Of course. Some niche internet cult. Yeah. I'm like, no, it was actually really meaningful. Okay. Well, 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think I've said all that I can say, and I do actually feel relieved and released from this, hopefully more. And then maybe now I can actually feel my real feelings about it. It's been really hard to feel my actual feelings around all of this. So maybe now finally they can come out. But okay. I will be back next week to hopefully do the Aries ingress chart, and then maybe we'll get more insights on the economy. And whatever else comes up, because talking about politics is not fun right now, but I do think it would be nice if we could get a little bit more insight, I don't know, on what the economy is going to be looking like over the next 3 years, because I would imagine we'd like to be prepared for real if we're really entering the greatest depression of all time, So I'm going to try to keep figuring that out, what the pattern of recessions and depressions actually is astrologically, and maybe we can get some answers. So in the meantime, thank you so much again. If you were here the whole time, please like the video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you're watching this on the playback, feel free to drop a comment. Tell me what you think. Tell me your thoughts, how you feel, and I will see you all next week. Thank you so much again. I love you all very much. Toodaloo!